In many ways, the ancient Greeks helped shape modern society. The Greeks taught us a lot, from how to run our government to how the court system works, and even how to fix our pipes. But not everything has stood the test of time. For example, closeness in ancient Greece was very different from how it is today. People in ancient Greece were much less strict about copulation than people today. In Athens, it was common to do dirty things with both men and women. Men would often take on proteges who would also act as passive sexual partners. In the past, copulation was a big part of society and social order. Kissing, on the other hand, is not like that. Men expected women to stay at home and have kids, even though many ancient Greek women died while giving birth. There were a lot of chances to be sexual in ancient Greece, and in some ways that's true. There were, however, social norms and unwritten rules that guided the practice. Sexuality was less rigid in ancient Greece, at least for men. Certainly, the ancient Greek civilization did not have any stigmas associated with sexual identification, at least not towards men. Not only were relationships between men permitted, but they were actively encouraged. The practice of homosexuality was a part of the larger concept of love, which was referred to as aphrodisia, and it was not influenced by gender or sex. There was no word for homosexuality itself. To suggest that it was a golden age for relationships between two persons of the same gender is not to say that it was. A number of historians are of the opinion that ancient Attic men considered dominance and penetration to be status symbols. When a man functioned as the passive partner, pathikos, or when a fully mature man allowed penetration from another grown man, he frequently faced derision. Pathikos in Greek means passive partner. These individuals were referred to as kinaidoi by the ancient Athenians, which was a pejorative term. Self-pleasure wasn't taboo, but it was a lower form of carnality. Due to the fact that carnal pleasures were so commonplace in ancient Greece, it is logical to believe that self-pleasure would have been less of a taboo as well. Despite the fact that it was subject to less limitations than it is in modern times, self-love was typically a topic of public discussion. For example, in Aristophanes' play, the public considered it to be an inferior and stupid deed. Although various manifestations of self-love were prominent in art, they frequently showed less privileged non-citizens, such as women, engaging in the act of self-love. During or after a physically demanding event, such as a symposium, these drawings frequently depicted the individual indulging in self-indulgence. Most of the time, it was the female workers who were praising themselves, rather than the male workers. The concept of self-love was also connected to slaves. It was a representation of the inferior status that they had. Coitus was widely accepted in Greek society, but according to Greek standards, it was considered embarrassing to engage in sexual activity with oneself without the presence of another person. Greeks once tolerated and encouraged boy relationships. A number of behaviors that are today considered to be morally repugnant were included in the ancient Greeks' permissive attitudes about carnality. Pederasty, which refers to the situation in which an older guy takes on a younger male pupil as a protege and a physical companion, is without a doubt the most upsetting one. Considering that the dominating person in an intimate relationship was more concerned with being satisfied than the submissive spouse, the act was a reflection of attitudes regarding dominance and submission in Greek culture. According to Plato's Symposium, the love that exists between two men, and more especially the love that exists between an older man and a younger one, is the purest type of love. This is because the love between these two men has its origins in the desire to exchange knowledge and worldviews. Desire functioned as a bonus, rather than the driving force behind the connection. These attitudes were not always welcomed in Greece. By the time the laws were passed around 450 BCE, they discouraged harlotry, although the regulations mostly applied to men because they affected a person's capacity to run for office, which was not possible for women as a result of the laws. It is claimed that there was a large discrepancy between the formal laws and the actual customs that were going on at the time. Seducing a wife was worse than forced copulation. The ancient Greeks adhered to patriarchal ideals, and their mythology was filled with depictions of gods grabbing and abusing women. This gave the impression that imposing oneself on another person was not a particularly criminal act. As a matter of fact, the Greek gods, and Zeus in particular, were known for kidnapping and deceiving women into engaging in sexual activity. It was not only mortal women who were subjected to torture at the hands of gods who were insatiably hungry. In mythology, goddesses were also victims of such assault. There is no doubt that views regarding such assault were more relaxed in ancient times, despite the fact that the gods were not like the idealized and perfect beings that are associated with other religions. According to some accounts, seducing a married woman was more difficult than forcing oneself on another person. This is because it required one to treat the property of another man as if it were his own, which is a form of theft. According to Herodotus's writings, which were supposedly echoed by the Greeks, it was stated that even while it was unfair to force oneself on another person, it did not require vengeance. Ancient Greeks weren't interested in shame. Carnal pleasure is typically portrayed as a sinful act in Christianity and Catholicism, unless it is performed by a husband or wife. However, because the ancient Greeks existed prior to the spread of these religions, they attached very little to no religious significance to sex at all. This led to their more accepting attitudes toward different interests. Nudity was not considered a sham, which is why ancient Greek art frequently featured statues that were naked. There is also the possibility that public plays and artwork could represent behaviors that are so shocking that they would warrant a massive adults-only warning. Relationships between people of the same gender were permitted in ancient Greece, as were relationships that, by today's standards, would be considered extremely immoral, such as pederasty. They included male genitalia on celebratory and directional statues. The ancient Greeks did not consider it to be an obscene deed to show male genitalia in their works of art. In one of these depictions, the Herm, which is a statue of the god Hermes, also known as the messenger god and the protector of fertility, was displayed. A phallus that is realistically depicted and placed at the appropriate level is the only thing that distinguishes the god's bust from the rest of the pillar. In addition to being placed in front of people's homes, next to temples, and at intersections, Herms were also utilized by people as signposts. An act of vandalism occurred in the year 415 BCE during the Peloponnesian War, when the genitals of the Herms of Athens were hacked off. The act of vandalism was allegedly committed by Alcibiades, a prominent Athenian statesman. In spite of his denial of the allegations, his adversaries proceeded to sentence him to death in absentia. Ancient Greeks felt intrigued by cures for impotence. Due to the fact that the Greeks placed a high importance on intimate relationships as a component of their society, the absence of such relationships was considered a problem. As a result, they came up with a wide variety of treatments for impotence. It was widely thought that snakes could heal themselves, which led to the popularity of treatments that involved snakes. Similarly, because lizards were thought to be associated with sexual power, it was believed that eating a lizard would increase one's libido, and further treatment involved applying a mixture of pepper and honey to the male genitalia and massaging it in. It was hypothesized by some ancient Greeks that impotence was caused by concern about carnality caused throughout childhood. Not much is documented about the intimate problems that women faced or the pharmaceutical answers to those problems in ancient Greece, as is the case with many other topics. Sex work was legal and sometimes state-run. In ancient Greece, both men and women were qualified to engage in sexual labor as a lawful vocation. Because the majority of Attic women were housewives, they needed to be accompanied by a companion whenever they went out into the city. Given their position in Greek society, certain women, such as ladies of the night, concubines, and courtesans, had a degree of liberty that was not available to other women. Moreover, there were bordellos that were operated by the state in ancient Greece. Typically, these parlors provided slaves for the purpose of providing carnal pleasures. Nevertheless, some of the women became pornai, also known as streetwalkers. Unlike concubines, who typically had a contract with a single man rather than a contract with a bordello, concubines belonged to a slightly higher social class. Courtesans were the most privileged members of society. They were well educated and have the ability to excite men with both their wit and their bodies. Male sex slaves were not allowed to work in public service later in life since they were intended for older male clients. The widespread belief was that individuals who sold their bodies were more likely to be influenced by political bribes. Dirty humor was a huge part of Greek culture. Since the ancient Greeks did not hide their sexuality, it should come as no surprise that it played a significant role in their sense of humor. Aristophanes, one of the most famous comedic playwrights in Greek history, was known for writing exceptionally filthy comedies. Within the context of the play Lysistrata, for example, the women of Athens went on a sexual strike in an effort to bring an end to the Peloponnesian War. A plethora of gags about sexual promiscuity, double entendres, and raunchy comedy are included in the play. Aristophanes is said to have had 106 different ways to describe the phallus, and he had approximately 91 different words for female genitalia. The entire country of Greece was also covered in obscene graffiti, which included phrases such as, "Weep, you girls, my phallus has given you up, now it penetrates men's behinds, goodbye, wondrous femininity," and "Theophilus, don't perform oral sex on girls against the city wall like a dog." Despite liberal attitudes toward carnality, kissing was taboo. The act of kissing was not common in ancient Greece, despite the prevalence of carnality. Despite the fact that it was not strictly prohibited, kissing was more commonly associated with greetings. In later times, Romans, who drew a lot of inspiration from Greek cultures, would greet one another by kissing on the lips. However, the social standards of ancient Greece included limits on kissing certain people. Regardless of the nature of the relationship between the two parties, kisses between family members and pecks between men were seen to be more socially acceptable than kisses between men and women in public. Women who passionately kissed other people were considered to be disreputable and overbearing by the general public. This was a trait that was perceived as undesirable because the public expected women to adopt a submissive role. The reason that a man would choose to kiss his wife is most likely to determine whether or not she was drinking while he was away. Musicians may have performed intimate favors at symposiums. The majority of people are familiar with the term symposium because of Plato's work of the same name. Nevertheless, this only touches on a few aspects of the well-known dinner and discussion groups. Men met together to drink and talk about lofty issues, and the party did not finish with smart banter. Passion was also a component of the equation. The hypothesis put forward by historians is that female musicians and courtesans engaged in sexually intimate activities with the men who attended these events. The image of this type of celebration that Plato provides depicts a more sober form than what was probably typical in ancient Greece. The satyrs embodied Greece's hypersexual fixation. Carnality was something that was less of a taboo in ancient Greece. Therefore, many people did not consider it to be offensive or morally wrong to talk about it freely with others. There are not many cultural icons that are more significant evidence of this than the satyr, which is a goat-footed creature that is a disciple of Dionysus, the Greek god of alcohol and entertainment. They did this by incorporating their appetites, which were typically for nymphs, into their storytelling. Due to the fact that the satyrs were exceptionally insane, their name became the basis for the ailment known as satyriasis, which is a fictitious condition that affects men and is characterized by strong compulsive desire. In ancient Greece, the condition was a prerequisite for becoming a satyr in the traditional sense, complete with goat legs. Different gods and words illustrated various forms of love. The term love encompasses a wide range of human emotions, ranging from affection for one's family to passionate love. In ancient Greece, this was not the case. There were various sorts of love, and each type of love had its own unique language and gods to express its significance. Aphrodite, one of the most well-known deities of love, is the ruler of romantic relationships that are close and personal. It is her name that gives us the word aphrodisiac, which refers to a chemical that stimulates sexual desire. The word erotic originates from the name of the god Eros, who was the ruler of intimate passion. In the event that there was no one god who ruled over a particular kind of love, the ancient Greeks established their own terminology to describe that kind of love. Ludus is a love that is lively and fun, the kind that is typically found between children or lovers who are in the honeymoon stage of their relationship, but agape is a form of love that is universal and kind. A long-lasting love that has been fostered over time is referred to as a pragma. Not all of the love kinds that were identified in Greek civilization are listed here. Nonetheless, by having a range of love types, they were able to differentiate between desire, romance, relations, and play in order to underline their beliefs regarding each notion. We hope you liked this video, subscribe to the channel if you're a history addict, and please let us know about what civilization or time period we should talk about. Also, watch another video here.